sure things like tiger anesthetics, giraffe anesthetics, your heart is going pretty fast, especially with the animals that can potentially, severely hurt or kill you. Yeah.
Welcome to What the 40 with me, Rich Rust. It's an honour to welcome this week's guest, Dr. Justine Shotton. Justine is a vet with well over 15 years' experience across the sectors, including 8 years as a zoo and wildlife vet. She graduated from the University of Bristol with distinction in 2008, together with a first-class BSc in veterinary pathology from the Royal Veterinary College. Justine's impressive and varied career includes being elected to become the Junior Vice President of the British Veterinary Association in 2020. The BVA is a not-for-profit organisation and the largest membership body for vets in the UK, with over 19,000 members. In 2021, she became president with her presidential theme of environmental sustainability. She is currently senior vice president and following the end of her presidency this autumn, will take up a new national role as the RSPCA's lead vet for wildlife and exotics. Outside of work, Justine is an avid traveller, having visited over 50 countries. She's also a keen sportswoman, enjoying kitesurfing, running, and now Olympic weightlifting. We met through our mutual passion of skydiving many years ago. Justine, welcome to the show. Hello.
Hi, thanks so much. It's great to chat.
No, thank you. It's really good to chat to you. And there's so much to get into. I'm just going to start straight off the bat with Olympic weightlifting because that's not what I know you for. And I'd like to understand what is it and how does it work?
Yeah, so Olympic weightlifting is just basically a type of weightlifting where you only do 2 lifts and they're the Olympic lifts. So that's what they do in the actual Olympics, which is why it's called that.
Okay.
So there's the snatch, which is basically where you throw the barbell up over your head. And then there's the clean and jerk, which is where you sort of chuck it onto your shoulders, go into a squat and then push it up over your head.
Nice.
And I just wanted to try some strength training, having never really done weights beyond, a 2 kilo barbell before. And it's meant to be really good for you, for your bone density and your general sort of health as you get older.
Yeah.
So it's been really fun. My coach is great. She's super relaxed. It's a really nice environment. We've got all sorts that go. It's definitely not the sort of macho atmosphere that you might assume.
Yeah.
I've been really enjoying it.
Awesome. And what was your, why that? What was your motivation?
Yeah, it's a good sort of type of training to mix up with things like running and other cardio that I do.
Nice. Very good. And interestingly, I mean, obviously the podcast is called What the 40. You've already mentioned health and bone density benefits. So let's go straight to it. You started this around the age of 40?
Yeah.
Any conscious awareness of that, or is it just coincidence?
I mean, I suppose I sort of was aware of it. There've been a lot of conversations going on sort of in my peer group, both professionally and sort of with my friends around, getting older, staying fit. I think there's more in the social awareness around things like osteoporosis in women, around the menopause changes, et cetera, et cetera. So I want to stay strong and fit as I get older. I also haven't had kids yet. And, hopefully one day that could be an option for me. But I want to make sure I'm as fit and healthy and strong as possible, even if I'm a bit older. So, hopefully. Yeah,
that makes good sense. No, really cool. And just on that, you mentioned professionally as well there. I mean, I'm very interested to get into your career, which is enormously impressive. And obviously we've known each other a long time, so I've kind of seen your career evolve. But I guess there's also a kind of benefit to, it sounds like you have a pretty hectic, busy schedule. So staying fit and healthy is pretty useful for that too, right?
Yeah, definitely. Not only sort of physically, I mean, I was working in a zoo for 8 years, so we're having to roll giraffe and rhino around and to be pretty fit and healthy for that. But also I think mentally, I really notice when I'm super busy, often exercise is the first thing to go. And actually that's the thing that I need the most to clear my head, whether that's going for a run in the countryside or going to a gym class and listening to some really loud music.
Yeah.
I think I need that. So I'm quite conscious that if I don't have that in my life, I feel worse.
Yeah. It's an interesting one. It's a consistent theme with guests I've had on the podcast the last few weeks, with people saying that, and I think for me, that's something that's become certainly more pronounced at this point in time of my life. I mean, I'm framing it around turning 40, but I guess just a function of getting older. But I think you really, really just appreciate, to use your words, like getting outside and just being in the moment and doing something that gives you a stress reliever and a release from the day to day and just allows you to recharge and refresh, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, I mean, a lot of us at this sort of age are in phases of our career where they're possibly the most intense. I mean, for me personally, I've definitely had the most intense 3 years of my life career-wise. And it's been amazing, but it's been exhausting at times. And I think you have to really make the effort and the time to A, sleep, and B, get some exercise and eat some decent food in between things as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Sleep's a very good point, and one which we should not ignore. And funnily enough, we both talked about our lack of sleep prior to starting this record. So you talk about your 3 intense years and in the roles that you've done with the BVA. Would love to know about kind of how that came about and how you kind of go from being a working vet in a zoo to taking on that role. How do the roles vary? You know, I'm guessing most of our listeners don't really know what that entails. So give us a kind of headline view of that role and what it means.
Yeah, so working for the BVA, the British Veterinary Association, as you said, they're the organisation that represents the voice of vets in the UK. And we champion sort of the role of vets, but also things like animal welfare and trying to get better standards around trade deals and all of this sort of thing. And the presidency as well as the vice presidency, so you do a year as junior and then a year as senior after.
Yeah.
They're basically the leaders of the profession, so you're the spokespeople. There's a lot of sort of media work, there's a lot of public affairs, so we go and do political speeches and that kind of thing, and try and talk to MPs about animal issues and veterinary issues. Or you go to CPD events, so continuing professional development like conferences, and do talks on what's going on in the profession. And, you know, hopefully represent the voice of all vets in the UK as well as we possibly can. So it's been completely different to anything I've done before. And I got into it I volunteered for BBA on their CPD committee, sort of helping, because I had quite a broad background of veterinary tasks and jobs I could sort of feed in. And over the years, I learned more about BBA. I then became a trustee of their charity, which is called the Animal Welfare Foundation, and learned even more. And it sort of evolved from there. And I was just very fortunate to be elected in. I think they hadn't ever had a zoo vet as president before. I was only the 6th woman president. So it feels really prestigious. And it's been absolutely amazing.
Yeah, nice. And I guess all the things you talked about there. So, you know, taking on media engagement, how did you find that? Because I'm guessing that was quite a change in step from your usual day-to-day professionally.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was a sort of a weird time because I found out that I got the junior vice presidency about February 2020. And then obviously the world changed dramatically with the pandemic. So all of my first year was at working from home with hardly any sort of media work, very limited interviews, and they're all on Zoom. So that was quite a big change then going into the presidency when things opened up and I was doing a lot more face-to-face and sort of live TV and that sort of thing. And I was genuinely quite worried about it and quite scared. Now, having done quite a bit of it, I absolutely love it. And it's one of my favourite things. And I think the opportunity to try and engage with the public around animal issues to help them understand things better is exactly sort of what motivates me to do this job. You know, and highlights for me, like being on the sofa on Crust talking about dog health, you know, being live on BBC News talking about dog breeding and irresponsible dog breeding, that kind of thing. All of this is, it's been amazing. Yeah,
nice. I can imagine. Yeah, Croft is pretty epic. And you also recently spoke to the Parliamentary Select Committee, right? Did I get that right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I've given evidence a couple of times. Once was during lockdown, so that was remote on sort of zoo standards and that sort of thing. And dog imports. More recently, we spoke on a whole host of dog-related issues. I've spoken to them in the past on keeping primates as pets. So this is all related to new legislation that we hope to pass in the UK to improve things for animals across the board. But it's great that they take the time to listen to you, but, you know, it's quite an intense format being grilled for the MPs.
Yeah. And do they grill you? Do you get difficult questions?
Yeah, I mean, I think in that most recent session, pretty much all of the MPs thought what we were suggesting were very sensible measures. I think that they do press you and they do ask for the evidence and they do want to really understand the issue. But it was an enjoyable experience despite it being quite intense.
Nice. No, I mean, it's just a wonderful experience to have professionally, right? It's if you can go up against a a group of MPs, a group of lawmakers, and be credible, then there's probably not many things you can't do after that, I would think.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just wonderful to be in the House of Commons. I mean, I'd never been there before I started the presidential terms, and we even had an event in the House of Lords, and I gave a little speech sort of literally in the House of Lords, which was amazing too.
Yeah.
So, yeah, brilliant experiences.
Yeah, wonderful. And do you feel in your role that you've actually been able to kind of affect some change? It sounds like many of the issues that you're spotlighting are, you know, A, of genuine importance, and B, you know, if you're involved in kind of actual lawmaking, that's pretty compelling. So I guess that's something you can look back on fairly proudly on the role.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I thought I would miss the clinical work more. But in actual fact, because I've been doing this work that hopefully will have even bigger impact and help improve the lives of many, many more animals in the grand scale of things, that has been extremely rewarding and actually made up for not having the sort of hands-on care of, you know, the tapir in front of you or the penguin or whatever it is, you know, so that's been really great. And I think that as a vet, and from, you know, the large majority of the vets, it's the impact that we make, you know, on the people and the animals that really drives us to do this job. And it's been completely rewarding, and it's such a great team to work with at the BVA as well.
Nice, I can imagine. And so, but going back to the clinical piece, I'd love to hear, and you talked about rolling around giraffes and working with penguins. I mean, what did your day-to-day look like in that role? I mean, just give us a snapshot.
So, I mean, at the zoo, every day was a different day. We would do a mixture of looking after sick patients, which actually, to be fair, on the whole, they were pretty fit and healthy because they don't have sort of trauma from walking in the park and stepping on bits of glass or barbed wire or anything like that. You know,
or working at computers.
Yeah, exactly. Nice, safe environments. They don't have production stress like farm animals do because they're not producing, you know, huge quantities of milk, for example. So they're on the whole, they're pretty healthy. We do a lot of focus on preventative health. So there'll be things like vaccinations. There's quite a lot around animal welfare and engaging the animals with veterinary care. So we'll do training for blood draw or for hand injections, so we don't have to dart them because it's much less stressful for them. So that's really engaging. Working on best nutrition. And then we do most animals in sort of good conservation focused zoos are not owned by the zoo. They're sort of looked after. So they are occasionally moved around the world, particularly within Europe, for breeding purposes.
Yeah.
And so we'll do things like pre-export health testing, just checking there's no disease issues before we send animals away on a relatively regular basis. But it really can depend. Some days are office days, some days you're out in the field with a Kowalski wild horse doing a foot trim or something like that.
Yeah. Any scary moments in your time in the zoo?
I mean, thank God nothing drastic has happened. You do have elements of fear in the job because you're the one responsible for the health and well-being of the animal as well as all the people when you're doing a task on an animal. And sure, things like tiger anaesthetics, giraffe anaesthetics, you know, your heart is going pretty fast, especially with the animals that can potentially, you know, severely hurt or kill you.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, and you want to make sure you've got your anaesthetic spot on for everyone's safety, including the animal. Yeah. And it isn't always easy. But yeah, thankfully I've managed to keep all my fingers and toes despite that job.
That's good to hear. So I guess bringing all of that together, you are about to take on a role as the RSPCA's lead vet for wildlife and exotics, which sounds incredible. I'm guessing you're looking forward to it, but tell me about that and what that entails and what you're most looking forward to.
Yeah, thanks. I'm super excited about it. I think it's going to be a really exciting and challenging role. It's a new role within RSPCA, so the sort of structure of it will be to lead things like strategy and coordination of the wildlife centres. So they've got 4 wildlife rehab rescue centres across the UK that deal with things like, you know, seal pups that have been stranded or have injuries, waterfowl, for example, hedgehogs that have been brought in by members of the public, those sorts of animals. So coordinating their centres so that they all have a sort of united approach, but also helping to support the veterinary profession more generally with wildlife cases, because we don't get taught a lot at uni about wildlife care. You know, there's not a lot of drugs that are licensed for use in those animals. So you have to have a bit of knowledge as to what's safe, what's effective, what's good pain relief. And when a member of the public brings in a sick or injured animal, a wildlife species, then really vets need to know how to deal with them and what's the best practice. So I'll be supporting all of that link up as well as helping out the wildlife inspectors on what to do when they rescue exotic pets, for example, snakes that they've had to rescue. So yeah, huge amount of work. I'm not entirely sure what to expect yet, but I've got lots of ideas and I'm super excited about it.
Nice. I mean, it sounds fascinating. It sounds really, really interesting. And again, an opportunity to affect change and to do good things. And will you be doing much media and sort of a similar role to the one at the BVA in that sense?
Yeah, so I think that there'll be elements of media work, and RSPCA obviously have a big team across the board, so they'll have a great PR side, and I'm sure we'll link up on things like press releases when we do some of this engagement. So yeah, I'm keen to continue those sorts of opportunities as much as possible too.
Nice, very cool. Kind of bring all that together, and we talked at the beginning about exercise and turning 40 and professional career and kind of reflecting on where you are in your career. I'd love to get into how you reflect on turning 40 in general, and whether it's been a moment of existential crisis, excitement, abject fear. How do you reflect on it, and how do you feel about it as you kind of embark on the next decade, which sounds to me like you're in an epic place career-wise and you've got lots to look forward to. But I'd love just to get your general thoughts on the topic of turning 40.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, it's a weird time, isn't it? I think I've probably felt all of those things that you described it one way or another. I mean, to some extent, it's just carrying on life as normal. Nothing's changed. I'm still the same person, etc., etc. But in other ways, I'm like, oh, I'm 40 now. That's it feels so old. Yeah. Sounds so old. And to some extent, I've achieved so much that I never would have even dreamed of, especially career-wise. In other areas of my life, I feel like I would have thought I'd have done things by now. I mean, I just bought a flat last year, which was my first step on the property ladder finally, but it's just a really small flat. So, I would have thought I'd done that maybe a decade ago, and the same for, family and kids and all the rest of it. And I know that there's never a right time for anything and everyone's sort of got their own journey, but part of me is a bit... it is a bit terrifying to think, oh, half your life is gone. And again, I know that nothing is guaranteed and it's all based on averages and anything can happen at any point. But I guess it has made me think more than other birthdays have, even sort of turning 30. It's made me really think, what am I doing with my life? What do I really want to achieve? What impact do I want to have? I'm the sort of person that is extremely purpose driven, and I need to be fulfilling my purpose and sort of ideally, trying to change the world in some way, shape or form to feel like I'm fulfilled. So I feel all of that, and I feel this extremely strong drive to kind of keep pushing on that. At the same time, I feel like the months and years are just flying by, and I don't slow down and just appreciate it, then I'll be 80 and it will be too late. So loads of emotions.
Yeah, I hear you on all of that, and I think I share most of those perspectives with you. It is interesting. You kind of, it is like you put a clock on it in a way that you haven't at any other point in time. That I've definitely been really conscious of that, and you definitely take stock. You definitely think about, I guess, because the next big one is really big. 50 is nuts, and that feels like a really grown up age. But there's also so much to be thankful about, to be positive about. I think, to use your words earlier, if you're healthy and well and you're looking after yourself, then actually it's actually a great time. Because I don't know about you, but I don't feel particularly different to how I did in my 20s or 30s, with the odd, maybe a bit more tired. But I think there's so much you can still do. And of course, people are, generally speaking, able to live longer lives, be healthier for longer, do all of those things. So there is so much to be positive about, but it definitely does take it's an interesting kind of inflection point. And I guess, career wise, and I appreciate for you, because you did a veterinary degree, or multiple veterinary degrees, we should say. I guess you possibly started professional life slightly later than if you'd done a 3-year degree. But in many ways, I kind of think we're kind of mid-career or heading towards mid-career. And that's I think for me, more than anything, that's the timeline that freaks me out more than anything else.
Yeah.
To think that in 20 years, you might be at retirement age.
Yeah, completely. Yeah, it's so interesting. I mean, I think that it like you say, it does make you stop and take stock and reflect on all of this. And I'm the sort of person that thinks a lot about the past and the future, and like you say, there's so many amazing positives on both sides of that, and so many goals that I want to work towards. I want to write a book. I've got all these other things I want to achieve, but I think for me now, sort of turning 40 has really made me feel like I actually need to continue pursuing those, but also sort of slow down and enjoy life a bit along the way, because otherwise it would just be gone.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, and one of the questions I was going to ask you, and you've kind of touched on it, was, are you broadly where you kind of expected to be at this point in your life? And I think you answered that really well, which is professionally, you probably achieve things or maybe ahead of where you thought you might be, and in other ways, maybe not quite. But yeah, how do you reflect on that? I mean, it's such a hard question because the goalposts and that change daily, right? I think.
Yeah, it's such a hard question. I mean, I've definitely done things that I would never have thought that would be possible by now. I mean, the animals that I've worked with in the zoo and even sort of in the wild in Africa during my masters and things, they were amazing. That's amazing experiences. The pregnancy, being at basically the pinnacle of my profession was incredible. And, I did that under the age of 40 just. But at the same time, I've only just gotten the property ladder. I'm still living on my own. There are other things where financially I haven't got a stack load of savings that I would have thought in my 19-year-old brain that, by the time I'm 40, I'm going to have a garden and, live the happy life. Yeah. And it's not that I'm not, it's just that, that it doesn't always work out the way you think it is going to. And I think I need to just make peace with that, because I did have quite a rigid plan for my life when I was younger. Yeah.
And I think, society doesn't help us, right? Because it creates this whole set of expectations around what you should achieve by X date. And we kind of, by default, we sort of frame it in those terms. And I think actually, you said it earlier, people, actually have to think about your own path and your own journey. And I think that's probably, there's a lot to be gained from trying to frame it in that sense.
Yeah. And I also think, what the last 3 years has taught me more than anything is to just go for it, even if you're quite scared about it, because I was quite scared about it. I did have the syndrome, especially around the media stuff and giving speeches. I was not, it comes across really well, but inside I'm like terrified, and I'm much better now because I've had a lot more practice. But, things like that. Yeah. That has been such a life-changing experience for me doing that. And even a few years ago I ran a marathon, and I never in my wildest dreams when I was 10 years younger would have thought that was a possibility for me. No. And just the other week, I squat the weight of my body weight doing a squat, which again, I never thought I would have been able to do. So I think you have to just, set your limits higher, or try not to limit yourself and just have a go and believe in yourself.
So true. You can do so much more than you ever allow yourself to think you can. And I think we are wired that way, which is, again, a kind of function of society. But well, it's good to hear. And look, I'd love to get a sense from you in terms of, you do so many epic things, and it sounds like you are driven both professionally and personally. So, but where do you seek out your inspiration? And I'm guessing because you have quite a specific profession, it might be quite a hard thing to do, but what are your sources of kind of daily inspiration, be it professionally, personally, or just for fun?
Yeah, so I didn't have animals when I was very little growing up, and yet I always wanted to be a vet. It's a very vocational career for most vets. They can't really remember deciding to want to be a vet. They just always did. Yeah. And that was definitely the case for me. And over the years, we got hamsters, and then a rabbit, a guinea pig, and some cats. And then eventually, by the time I was 14, we got dogs. And my parents were hugely supportive of me wanting to be a vet, and used to drive me to riding lessons. And my dad was a biologist, academic, so he sort of definitely inspired me. And, mum was always so supportive too. So I think, my parents continue to be a source of inspiration, as does my rest of my family, really. I think, for me, knowing that I'm hopefully making a difference, both to animals' lives and also around my theme of sustainability. I mean, the world is in such chaos, and the climate crisis is is so pressing. And I know it's so easy for all of us to kind of just get on and live our lives and try and put it to the back of our mind. But now, I mean, the last few months and years, we're really seeing the impacts. And I think, we really do have that responsibility. So I've just tried to do a little bit within the veterinary profession on working on, how veterinary practices can reduce their impact. And I think having people come up to me and be like, oh, I'm so glad you chose that as your theme, or I'm so glad that you worked on this bit of resource, or whatever it is, knowing that you're helping people, that is extremely rewarding and inspiring.
Yeah, no, it makes complete sense. And actually, I had this exact conversation. The last person I interviewed for the podcast, we got really deep into this. And, one of the things I said was, I just feel like if governments could come together globally and create some kind of, and my view on it was, kind of, I guess, putting my responsible capitalist head on, I was kind of thinking, if they could just incentivize acceleration, create a system that made corporates and everybody stand up and just take this seriously. I just don't get a sense that the scale, the critical mass of how we need to address this has really been captured. But I'd love to get your thoughts on it. I mean, as somebody who obviously made it their theme through your profession, and given your profession, you would see so many elements of it. But what's your view on how the world sorts this out? I mean, the answer's simple, right? We just have to reduce our emissions. How do we get there?
Yeah, it's really tricky. I think that we have almost more of a responsibility in the Western world because we, A, can more easily change our behaviours, and B, we are the ones that are impacting, those other countries the most by what we do.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's pretty hard because we've come to be so used to this lifestyle and the sort of disposability and cheap clothing and getting a new phone every year and all the rest of it, and living a nice life. And, I understand why all the humans want to do that. I think one of the problems is there are just so many more people now. I mean, I've noticed wherever I go now, it's always busy. Whether it's in London, outside London, travelling, it's always busy. And at least in the past, there were a few times when you'd be the only one somewhere or just a handful of people. And it just isn't like that anymore, which is terrifying. But I think that, trying not to get overwhelmed with it and trying to do actions that you can do that are easy enough to do and setting up yourself for success. So trying to make it as easy as possible to do, little things that can have big impact, that can happen. I agree with you about having, international cooperation and coordination on this as well. The problem is that I think that, a lot of politicians are just challenged by the immediate threats in front of them right now and in the next year ahead. And so it's so hard for them to see that long term.
So true. I mean, ultimately, if you cling to an agenda that voters can't see an immediate or short-term response to or benefit from, then they decide that actually it's not a vote-winning policy, and that is problematic. And you could argue, of course, that there's more to be gained from staying in power and being able to affect change over time versus being perceived as the person that keeps banging on about the issue that's so far away. But as you said, I think you don't have to be the brightest mind to see the impact that it's having on the world day to day. But to pivot away from how we save the planet and to talk for a moment about travel, which I know is a passion of yours, and I talked about in the intro how you visited over 50 countries, which, by the way, is enormously impressive in itself. So how do you approach travel now, given everything we've talked about? What do you have by way of kind of upcoming travel, and what are you looking forward to in terms of kind of potential trips in future?
Yeah. I mean, I love traveling, and I feel very conflicted now. Now I know more about the sustainability agenda, especially things like emissions from flying. And, genuinely, we should all be flying long haul, once every 7 years if we want to sort of keep our footprint low, and I do fly more than that. So I'm aware of that sort of conflict, and I try and manage it as best I can and do things like good, robust offsetting, for example, and travel in a greener way where I possibly can, and especially when I'm in the UK. And just when I'm out there, live in a more sustainable way, a more mindful way.
Yeah.
But I do still love traveling, and it's something that I've loved since a kid. We didn't travel internationally much as children, but we went around the UK to sort of Cornwall and Lake District and had amazing holidays there. I then went to Malawi on a sort of school trekking trip, almost working for the Forestry Commission out there when I was 17, I think, and saved up a load of money. And we went hiking in the mountain range for 6 weeks. It was part of my Duke of Edinburgh award as well. But that was probably the game changer for me.
Quite an eye-opener after doing lots of UK travel as a kid.
Yeah, completely. And, since then, in my gap year, I worked in the mini factory building cars before travelling around the world.
I remember you doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And since then, I really love exploring new places. And I only just sat down the other day wondering how many countries I've been to. And there was a little app that you could do the tick sheet of the different continents.
Yeah.
And I counted them up and it was 50. And I was like, wow, that is quite a lot. And I'm so lucky. I feel so privileged and lucky to have been so many places. But I do think traveling, it broadens your mind, it makes you more accepting, it helps you understand people, and it makes you feel really grateful too.
Well, that's it. It just broadens your outlook so much. And even the issues that we're talking about, even when you try to understand climate change in the round, because it is enormously complex when you start thinking about it geopolitically, but actually having had that exposure to how the world operates internationally, it just changes your view, and you start to understand the specifics and the nuances of how people are impacted day to day in different parts of the world. And that is, frankly, I think part of the required knowledge of solving this problem ultimately.
Definitely.
And you talked earlier about the advancement in the West and how we have a responsibility to do more than the countries that can't afford it. I think it's so true, and there's so much to be said for that. But to go for a more lighthearted kind of final section, I always ask everyone what their guilty pleasure is, and I would love to know what yours is. And you're not allowed to say weightlifting.
It's difficult. I do genuinely love going for a run, although I've done a bit less of that recently. But I do feel like that clears my head. If I was going to pick a healthy one, I'd choose that. If I was going to pick an unhealthy one, I would say...
it can't be guilty if it's healthy, right? Yeah, so you have to...
Fair enough. What do I love? I do love, and I rarely get to do this, but I do love lying on my sofa, watching really gripping series, back to back. And it's so unusual that I get downtime. I love that. I love cooking, baking. Again, I need to prioritize these things because they're stuff I really enjoy. And the eating afterwards.
Nice. Very good. Well, Justine, thank you so much. This has been really interesting, and I've loved chatting to you. This is great. Thank you.
Oh, thanks. No, it's really great to chat, and looking forward to hearing the rest of the series too.